Hi everyone, my name is James McConville. I'm an architect and director with Accelerating Change Together or ACT, and this is a video presentation for Visualising Futures, which is part of the Newtownmountkennedy Town Centre First Plans development. This presentation is best watched prior to completing the survey if you're within the time period of the Town Centre First Plan development, and it's been created to help in demonstrate along the way how the plan has been developed, retrospectively once the plan is complete, but also as part of the process for people to have to hear their views and all the different features that are proposed within this document. In terms of Town Centre First, it's a policy developed by the Irish government to help regenerate our towns through looking at it from the centre out. As discussed, this is part of a design process, and this is the Visualising Futures part of the process. I think one thing I should stress is all of these, this is a design process, so any images or futures that you're seeing proposed in this are ideas presented by the community and provided by the community during the first storytelling workshop, and they're used to ideate, to hear your views, which ones are good in principle, which ones would need some development, which ones we just got wrong and we shouldn't be developing further. So I think it's important when you're watching this presentation to view it in that context. This is a design process, and there will be things that we get wrong and things that we get right, and that's okay, and that's how the design process works. So I'm going to now move through this. I'll try and do it relatively rapidly, because some of you may have already been in the in-person presentation, but this presentation is for the people that weren't able to participate, and it's part of the survey that is dovetailed with the workshops activities that were held at the in-person event on it was the 11th of August. So Town Centre First objectives are to define a role, to create an image for the town, to generate vibrancy and vitality, provide sustainable growth, protect heritage and culture, ensure sustainability, and foster social inclusion. In the first workshop, we broke these into themes that we were discussing and getting people to map the constraints and opportunities of Newtownmountkennedy through these 6 different themes. And this is the main overview of Newtownmountkennedy in County Wicklow. In terms of the town's development, it developed from obviously the Mount Kennedy estate, and developed over time, and you can see from the period of the 1800s, 1820s to 1996, it developed relatively slowly. But since 1996 and then to 2015, Google Maps is able to see a year by year development. You see 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 22, 23, 24. And now in 2025, you can see the massive development that this town is going through in terms of residential expansion. And best typified with this image side by side with 1995 and 2025. So it's important to see this development of this Town Centre First Plan in this context. Every town is different. Every town has its own history, heritage, different ways it's developing. In the context of Newtownmountkennedy, it's a rapidly developing town. So how the Town Centre First Plan needs to respond to that fact. Highlighting again with the demographics, we talked about in the initial storytelling, the almost a half increase from 2011 to 2022. And that's going to do the same again between 2022 and 2028. Another key factor about Newtownmountkennedy is the fact that most people don't work in Newtownmountkennedy, so the state average is over half, but in Newtownmountkennedy it's less than a quarter. And most people are commuting by car compared to almost just half nationally. And more than half the population's commute is 30 minutes, and a quarter is over 45 minutes or more. In terms of the town centre zone, we looked at the different demographics, and it was primarily married couples with children. More 60% of the households are families with children. There's been campaigns for services to service those the growing population and the families, with a campaign for a new secondary school. And there's been also increasing national and global pressures, most notably with the rise in temperatures and also with flooding. And it's thinking about the Town Centre First plan in those contexts as well. Ireland, like Newtownmountkennedy population is growing rapidly. Ireland, in the context of Europe's population, is growing very rapidly as well, and projected to have almost a third increase from 2017 to 2050. So that's the kind of context. This is find its way in Newtownmountkennedi's Town Centre First plan is being developed within. So really, how do we respond to the recent rapid growth, ensure Newtownmountkennedy thrives into the future? We conducted our first storytelling workshop back in June, and it was really interesting to hear the different stakeholders' feedback. Even in the feedback, people were mapping the constraints and opportunities on the maps themselves, and these ideas are feeding into the presentation you're seeing now in terms of the different futures that we are going to propose. And here is a list of some of the key community proposals from the first workshop. We created them and placed them on a map, and we will now dive into them in different sections and break them up into different kind of themes. We also talked about the different kind of themes in terms of heritage, green public space, mobility, energy, commerce, and community services. We actually asked the community to rank these as importance to them, and both online, with some people coming to the online survey and the in-person workshops, both got the same top three of green public space, community services, and mobilities being the key focus for the community. So Newtown in 2050 have an improved transport system, improved facilities for locals, improved facilities for youth, be a family-friendly town, heritage town, local employment in retail and hospitality, so no commuting, gateway to the gardens of Ireland, gateway to Wicklow Mountains and the sea, leading green tourism and employment, a climate resilient town, a green town, an ecological hub, place to experience nature, a local resilient economy, to be self-sufficient, to extend the forest and have more trees, and have people and nature thriving. So these were the different ideas that were proposed by the community of how they would like to see Newtown in 2050. So in terms of mobility, what we're going to do is present some different futures that are along different themes. In the accompanying survey, if you are going to complete the survey, these will be tied to in the same format, so you'll be able to comment on the different futures proposed, and we would love to hear your thoughts on them. Is it a good idea in principle? Is in terms of how we're proposing it, is it the right way? If not, please comment and please give us feedback in the survey, and we will take that on board for the next phase of the design process. So again, the futures I'm going to now present are ideas created by the community. We might get some wrong, we might get some right, and the survey is about, and the workshop that we previously had is all about teasing out which ones should be included in the final Town Centre First plan. So in terms of mobility, where Newtownmountkennedy sits in Wicklow, there's many existing trails beside Newtownmountkennedy. A lot of them pass by. There's some proposed trails, including the Mountain to the Sea Trail. In terms of connections, where Newtownmountkennedy sits in relation to Greystones, Kilcoo, and Newcastle, and out to Roundwood and the Wicklows National Park. So one of the first proposals was this idea of linking in with Mountains to the Sea trail. Connections potentially to Greystones, to the East Coast Greenway, the informal or informal Greenway as it is. Potential Newcastle connection, the existing bus networks, how it currently works. And one thing that came apparent through the initial discussions was the current way that public transport is set up. For example, to go from Newtownmountkennedy to Kilcoo, you have to take 2 buses. It takes 54 minutes, but if you actually do walk, it would be 57. So there's a massive opportunity there to improve the bus network so that it's It's a more easier way to take the bus and probably get people out of cars and discourage their uses of the private car. Again, uh, between going to Newtownmountkennedy and other towns around, you're seeing the same issues where it's actually because the public transport's not aligned, it's taking quite a long time, even though the distance is actually quite short between the towns. So that between that and Glendalough, for example. So a potential proposal was the use of maybe application for a local link. So connecting between potentially Greystones and Roundwood and Kilcoo as well. In terms of the existing, we had a map that we presented out and showed the existing Newtownmountkennedy and then the areas that I think are under development or are in planning currently or proposed. So seeing that there's even further expansion planned for the town, despite all the expansion that's already happening, so there's a lot more residential units coming. We highlighted some of the community highlighted some of the key challenges with this in terms of like narrow roads, in terms of bike lanes, in terms of the lack of bike paths or narrow footpaths, and where congestion was at pinch points. And we're going to show now some of the responses to the key challenges highlighted by the community in the first workshop storytelling. So one of the key ones was the main street congestion, the on-street park and the narrow footpaths. Current condition here. Fishers Junction, the traffic lights were people were feeling it was causing more delays than how it was previously. In terms of the Glenbrook Junction, the loading bay for Duns, and it was hard to turn and to use for others. Roads and congestion around schools. And the new roads were not so well used. So our key strategies that we developed from the challenges that were highlighted during the first workshop was to increase cycle and foot permeability, provide clear route hierarchy, improve public transport distribution, traffic flow optimization, discourage Main Street traffic, encourage Main Street footfall, and encourage active travel. So in terms of the cycling infrastructure, this is look how it's existing cycleways that are currently here. Potential proposals to connect, which we talked previously about the Mountains to the Sea Greenway, and maybe a connection to Newcastle. And connecting between the existing cycleways and down into the main street. And potentially other connections tying in maybe the GEA club and maybe linking in with the Greenway. So here's some potential opportunities just using the visuals to kind of unlock what's the potential in terms of one of the narrow roads entering the town. But if we were able to use the existing space to add a pedestrian cycle lane. In terms of the current bus route, we've highlighted where the bus stops are in use and also where the proposed bus stops are the new bus stops that are being created but they're not being used. We've even proposed a new bus stop where there's earmarked for the school development. So maybe there's a potential alternative bus route that links around the new developments around the town without people having to go down to the main street to catch the bus. And then if you see that with overlaid with the cycleways, there may be opportunities there for potential bike drop-offs and taking one form of active travel to get onto public travel. So even incorporate principles like park and rides. This is an example from Mayo of the introduction of the bicycle shares, and they've got already 100,000 trips. And they've been piloted in both Castlebar and Westport. There could be a potential way of integrating this into Newtownmountkennedy. Just highlight potential areas that that could be sharing points. In terms of the road network, you've got the main motorway to Dublin. You've got your main roads, your secondary roads, and then you've got residential streets. You've also got many dead end streets, and this is a problem that's been highlighted in a lot of our work across Ireland, where in terms of the residential developments, the cul-de-sac is preferred, but what that causes is a lot of roads literally to nowhere, and as a result, it takes a lot of time it's not as much permeability to actually in the urban realm. So, for example, from Mere Park, it takes a 16-minute walk, whereas if you actually had increased permeability, you could actually bring that down to like a 10-minute walk from being from the same place, just to have those little connections at the end of what were cul-de-sacs. Same again from Monolin, with some increased permeability, you get the 9-minute walk down to a 5-minute walk. And this helps make people that make a choice maybe of not getting in the car or taking the car, but maybe actually to walk instead. So an example of how that could look. In terms of the community block, with a lot of the services are found in the heart of the town. You've got a mixture of schools, the community hall. We did the workshop, and plug again. We're doing the workshop at the end of September there, so come along. Different schools, the creche, and the new creches that are being built currently. So in terms of the school access, as the current situation, the discontinued path, a raised curb, which actually we've seen on the following one has actually been lowered. Well done, County Council. In terms of some moves that could be done, we dropped the curb, which has already been done actually, extending the path down into the town itself, the main street. And also what we discovered was the current traffic movement means, because it's two-way traffic, that it lends itself to quite a busy junction with the tight streets. So one of the proposals from the community was potentially making this a one-way system, which does a couple of things. It encourages the use of the ring road, but also it gives us a lot more space and the opportunity for a drop-off lane where there is a series of schools and creches and community spaces. So it makes it a safer space as well. So this could be the potential situation if we did drop it to a one-way road with a drop-off lane. You could have some gathering spaces for people to gather, instead of it being dominated by a 2 lanes of traffic. And then maybe some additional space, you could even look at corporate and bike paths. So these are some of the improvement proposals. In different ways you could even approach that from further down where Duns is. Different ways of managing the traffic flow to actually alleviate some of the pressures. In terms of mobility on the main street, people discussed the traffic lights were causing delays, and there was a proposal potentially for a roundabout on that junction. In terms of street parking, there's 62 spots currently on the main street, and the current section with 2 lanes and 1 for parking, you've got 2.8 to the 2.9 width footpath. This changes a little bit as you move up the street, but from the section line we took in the middle. So if you were to make it two lanes, 2-way cycle paths, lanes, you would have to reduce your footpath down to around 2 meters. And that's what it would look like. And also a lot of people were talking about in the surveys of areas for safe crossing and traffic calming measures as well along the main street due to the heavy congestion with cars. Discussions were had about the potential for slowing down and increasing main street footfall through the potential use of shared surfaces and extending the public realm as well. Other discussions were around the current traffic flow. So currently, as per Google Maps, it takes 2 minutes to go from the top of the town along the main streets to the, from the Fisher's roundabouts all the way down to the Wicklow Way and the brewery and the kind of enterprise centre. But there was ideas were highlighted the potential of a proposed diversion where you use the new roads that created around the town and create almost a one-way system along the main street. This does a couple of things, whereas it currently to Google Maps is 3 minutes to go around, but there's a massive gain there if you do move to a one-way system down the main street. Whereas if the current situation is with 2 lanes of traffic and we left it with 2 lanes of traffic and idea of bike to two-way cycle lanes, if we switch to one way traffic, you get a lot more space for people on the main street and also the opportunity for potentially a green verge or some tree planting. You also have the opportunity for more parking in off the main street because you don't have the space challenge with having the 2 lanes. So this could be what it could look like with introduction of a green verge and having some maybe potentially some trees on the main street, but also the idea of additional parking spaces as well. And with that green verge, we could also explore the idea of sustainable urban drainage, and that discussion we were previously having about what makes a climate resilient space. And Ireland is going to become warmer and wetter and moving forward with higher temperatures, but also higher rainfall events. So how we could use sustainable urban drainage to help help the town adapt to that change in climate. An example here is the idea of slowing the water down before it goes into any stormwater and actually just taking it out of that and using it for increasing biodiversity as well along in the centre of the town. Here's an example from Sheffield, I believe. And then in terms of the public realm, there was different challenges were highlighted. The lack of vibrancy in the core and not accessible at all locations. So what we were looking at in terms of strategies was providing a generous public space, making the public realm accessible and inclusive, integrating climate resilience, include trees and greenery, showcase historic spaces and buildings, encourage vibrancy, and create a distinct town branding. So due to the location of Quilch's headquarters, there was a few ideas put forward about leaning in on that and the idea of using timber in your street furniture as a way of highlighting Newtownmountkennedy kind of unique location for the headquarters of Ireland's of Quilcher. Also the idea of a shopfront design code. Here's an example from Kinsale County Court. It wasn't that it needs to be necessarily that colour, punchy colours in that sense. It's about having a kind of a general language and a general swatch, like a colour swatch that can be reflective of what Newtownmountkennedi's brand wants to be, but at the same time have some kind of coherency. So different options there and how we could do that. In terms of Fisher's Square, one of the ideas of how to explore how you could maybe better utilize that space as the kind of one of the first things you see as you come into the town from the north. So they're maybe opening that up and creating a public square, incorporating some rain gardens, nature-based solutions, examples of the kind of the timber lighting or the kind of wood street furniture we discussed earlier. The idea of potentially a town square and what that could be like. So like looking at the space between Duns and the Parkview Hotel, potentially decluttering some of the space from some of the different things found on the main street. Bringing in the idea of more public space, maybe a bit more shared safe surfaces, safe crossing, incorporating with the cycle lanes previously discussed in the mobility, and bringing in nature and the green verges as well and the town branding aspects. So you can start to see some of these ideas being layered up again, and some of them are overlapping. But the idea of could this be helped to maybe create a more distinct town square? And again, the principles of shared surfaces. Learning from that, maybe some ways of doing that materiality that can make it a bit more accessible increase the accessibility as well for some distances. Discussing potential future access and viewpoints out maybe into Valley Pacus from this town square. So viewpoint. In terms of the churchyard, beautiful church, about around halfway down the main street. Looking at how that would look with a new kind of public realm, and potentially even just like removing the fencing. And it was built for a reason at the time, but in some ways it's such a beautiful building to be celebrated. You can actually see it and have a more kind of connection with the building itself visually. Accessible spaces. People were talking about access to the shops, making sure that they can be accessible for all, and that's one thing we want to create in all our spaces, that they are inclusive and accessible spaces for all. So playing around with how we could work with the different levels to allow people with disabilities as well to access the different shops on the main street. This could potentially take the form of integrated ramps. There was talk about celebrating the town's heritage a lot in the feedback from the storytelling phase and the 1798 memorial. Could we better utilize that space? Maybe incorporate some sustainable urban drainage, but also some outdoor seating as well. Maybe using the same stone or whichever kind of surfaces that we choose in terms of the development of the public realm. Heritage trail signage as well was brought in because there already is an existing heritage trail in the town. People really want to, and even during the first workshop, there's some interesting discussions where we were presenting back the heritage, and a lot of people came up after and was like, I didn't even know about that, and it's making this more accessible and people more aware of that. So could we take some of the great work that's already been done and use wayfinding signage to actually celebrate the town's existing heritage? So through creating a heritage trail. And what about the green spaces in Newtownmountkennedy? So some of the challenges was the lack of connectivity between these green spaces, accessibility issues, a lack of variety, and the linear park with the unconnected plots with different ownerships. So one of the key moves that was brought up again and again was linking and developing these green spaces. So reinforcing the existing green spaces, and this is the proposed development now that's currently being built, but connecting them with the existing infrastructure that's there and the schools that already exist. So you can see the connection here, the new kind of linear park, but it not being integrated with the existing, and this lack of connections with the existing school that is there in the playing fields. So connecting in with the green. And also, in terms of accessibility, if there is a slope, how do we work with that and maybe have fun with that and actually create spaces that can be playful, even if there are some topographical challenges. And if there's water, how best we can actually integrate that in as well into the design. So potential future connections as well. So first one linking, second one the potential future connections. In terms of linear park, a lot of talk was about Valley Pacus in the centre of the town as well, and the potential of that being part of a kind of a heritage park, having a form of connection there. And potential access from the main square, if we were defining the outside the Parkview Hotel, that being the new square in the town, could then be a linkage into Valley Pacus from there. The different buildings that already exist on it, could they be utilised in a different way? You maybe bringing in a ferry trail, the current usage and potential usages. and the existing valley paths with really old growth trees. And how we could maybe create a riverine walk so people could actually enjoy that, but making sure that it's very, very low impact in terms of how we bring trails through the site so that it's maximising and maintaining the high levels of biodiversity that already exist on the site. There's a fantastic mill found there. How do we develop that, or do we develop that? To different opportunities, potentially it's a picnic area or a playground or just a place to hang out and enjoy the nature and the space. Maybe it's about restoring it back to what it previously was. Again, this is kind of these different ideas that were proposed by the community. We are just trying to visualize back the different opportunities that exist. An example of one of ACT's projects that's currently going to planning, where it's taking an old building that initially the community were looking to develop the site, thought it wasn't worth keeping, but through the design process, it actually became apparent that this was part of their heritage of the area, and the old landlord house being actually maintained and actually restored in a way where it was reused or readapted in a different way, and actually led to being a kind of gathering space and a viewpoint space, and creates its own interest in architecture as a result. And then the potential for linkages. It's a lovely green space, and we heard in the workshops this was actually the place where many people went sledging when it was snowy on this hill. Maybe the potential for an amphitheater, or maybe even a natural, very low impact one, maybe not as engineered as this, but maybe just working with the slope. That was one of the ideas proposed by the community. In terms of the Wicklow Hills Park, there's discussions maybe of using the height, maybe having some form of viewpoint. That was another idea that was proposed, reimagining Wicklow Hills Park. Maybe a dog park. There was a lot of people discussing the areas. There's a lot of residents moved in. A lot of them have pets. Can we have a designated spot for dogs? Maybe a pump track for teenagers. In terms of the community services, one of the key things that was very apparent in the storytelling was with the rapid increase of housing, but the services to facilitate the housing wasn't keeping pace, so there was a lot of gaps. So we obviously mentioned the secondary school, but there's other elements that were called out: no secondary school, no outdoor ATM, no bank, lack of youth services, no library or civic space, and different services that need to be filled for the town is going to be able to grow sustainably. So some of the key strategies we looked at was defining potential sites for community services, proposing combining complementary functions for efficiency of space, consider future growth in service provision. So again, it's good to see that the creche and the community centre are currently under progress and is being constructed out of CLT as well, which is a very modern method of construction, timber as well, tying in with kind of Newtownmountkennedy Quilcha location as well. What other potentials exist for community services? That was the question we were asking ourselves, and looking at potential vacant sites and seeing how they could actually be utilised in the designated sites, obviously from the school. So one of the key things was discussed was the civic centre library. We felt that might be a good location along that main spine where many of the services have been kind of clustered, as you can see here. So could we utilise that space for a potential civic centre library? So you see it coming down the hill between St. Joseph's and Robert Monteith. You see it's an opportunity for maybe a kind of a very like a building that can be viewed from all four sides, like a public civic space, a civic building, and it could have different functions from the rear and the back and the front, street facing. And if we were tying it in with a strategy of developing a town square on the front end with the potentially single lane traffic, or whichever way we're going to develop that, there's lots of opportunities to make that building like a very visual, prominent building and a good civic building for the town. Also looking at the idea of backland development as well. So there's several vacant sites, how we could better use them so you could step off the main street and have your facilities maybe clustered within a kind of separate little courtyard, maybe a space for a youth centre, a family centre, a GP. So this is what it could potentially look like off the main street. And then looking at the kind of how the secondary schools could be developed up there on the higher up on the kind of hill where it's already been designated for a new school, tying in with the campaign. And maybe looking at primary school, there was a lot of discussions about the potential of a forest school, tying in again with Newtownmountkennedy being known for the Quilters headquarters. It has lots of woods around, so there's some opportunities there. And then in terms of employment and commerce, people were talking about lack of services in spaces for developing commerce and employment zones. So our key strategy was identifying key opportunity sites, encourage functions that match to the image of the town, encourage mixed-use areas, reuse of vacant structures, densification of the urban core. So one of the vacant sites, we looked at potentially how you could explore using a mixed-use development on that site. And some of the ideas of, instead of having just one type, residential or commerce or different types in one, having different types in one area. So it is a mixed use development, and bringing them in, tying in potentially the park and ride idea previously with the mobility idea. So trying to blend a few of the different features that were proposed by the community in the first workshop. Different potential opportunities of site activation. Another aspect that was brought up was this idea of self-sufficiency in growing food on site, and looking at how that could actually be done, and maybe bringing in polytunnels, a local like a co-op or a potential food growing area. So looking at different social enterprise markets, examples, one in Dublin, one in Limerick. So growing food, local food in the town, and kind of building on that kind of discovered during the discovery period process. There's lots of local kind of food production already, and different companies have set up. So building on that kind of brand and heritage already, and focusing on local production. Again, it could be different uses again. So this is the idea that we're being very propositional back and forth. It could be for maybe local agriculture or local grown food, or it could be for a dog park. Again, maybe the dog park previously location wasn't the right one. Maybe it's more suitable in this location. Or it could be an area for biodiversity, bringing more nature into the area. Maybe it's this area for focusing just on youth, like a youth centre, maybe the skate park, and a gathering space. There was discussions as well about this existing building, that's found within the forest. Could this be a gateway centre if it was, we were tying back to this idea of the mountains to the sea, kind of forest walk or greenway? Could this building be then maybe retrofitted or expanded and bring other aspects into it, like bike rental, or have an exhibition, a cafe within the forest? Maybe even tying into this idea of the woodland activity zones, and utilizing your forest in a different way. So what other options exist for commerce, services, and residential? Well, there's also a discussion about densification and lack of the housing diversity. So looking at the town centre analysis, what's currently being used and the different mixes that currently exist, and then seeing where there's an opportunity for densification. So these images are just again to show, taken from that image, where opportunity sites are for densification. If we were to increase the density of the buildings in the town, how would that look in terms of the scale of it? Up for Dons. And then overlaid, all of them overlaid in one image. So the natural assets and the green spaces, again, we touched on it previously on the green spaces, but some of these spaces are not connected. So how could we connect them in the design of the future town centre first plan, and the benefits of that in terms of native woodland and pollinator planting? Could there be aspects of like pocket parks? For example, the Act worked supporting in the co-design element of in Ballina, and how we can potentially reuse green space in different ways. Just layering up, potentially if we have the mobility and the overlap of mobility with increasing the green space connectivity at the same time. Again, just being propositional to see how best this could work for Newtownmountkennedy. So you've got the big, large woodland park, and also the existing woods. Is there an opportunity to connect? And finally, with the sustainable urban growth idea, in terms of how the town can develop going forward, in terms of energy as well, is there an opportunity for local energy production with solar farms? An example from Claremorris of co-ops where they're owned by the community, and then they're owned by and for the community. Could this be employed in Newtownmountkennedy? Some potential locations for that. Again, propositional. So we want to hear from you what works and what's a good in principle or could be edited or changed. So in a lot of the development has been to the west, if you're looking north, sorry, but there hasn't been much to the east. So as the town grows, do we want to just keep the town growing out to the west, or is there an opportunity to link in and in terms of the road network almost create that loop? And that would allow for additional growth out to the east. And potentially in that growth, we could then explore different models of development rather than single-use development. It's not just residential; it's a blended mixed-use development of residential, commercial, potential to grow. Youth services, energy production, and trying to see could Newtownmountkennedy have an opportunity to explore different ways of development in terms of how it does its uses when it's building. And finally, just how that would look in terms of you overlay the different use cases that's already been done, and overlaying that with the green space and the connectivity with the forests, and potential overlaying again with the new potential green connectivity. Could that eastern development help create more of a coherent future town as it looks to grow even further into the future, and having the main street as the heart that's tying it all together. So I'd like to thank you very much for listening. Before I go, I want to just say we have the survey, which you can have a look through, and the different visual futures, different futures that were proposed in this presentation are found here, and it's going to an opportunity for yourself to discuss whether the ideas are good in principle. If not, why not? Is the idea good as proposed? If not, why not? And if any suggestions how this could be improved. And you'll find within this survey each of the different futures that were proposed initially by the community there. And what we would love to have is your feedback on these, and where we understand where the community's at in terms of how we want to develop this going forward, and almost get a short list and refine it and distill it down for the development of the town centre plan for Newtownmountkennedy. And the next workshop will be in late September, it's 29th. And I hope everyone can come along. And if you please follow the story maps, and we'll also include, which includes the poster for the the future workshops, you'll be able to see then the output of this survey and the workshop as the design is being developed further. And the next one, Pathways of Delivery, will be looking at the short, medium, and long-term actions to get to this desired plan. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and thanks for listening. And yeah, please fill out the survey.